We are good.
It is 7:01 and I will call the library board meeting to order.
All right, Chair Marie Hotta.
Here.
Vice Chair Andy Sakaris is not present. Maggie Burns.
Here.
Bryn Dunning.
Here.
Scott Gilbert.
Here.
Edie Hughes is not present. Dina Phelps is not present. Amy Wilson.
Here.
We have City Council Member Chelsea Noonenkamp.
Present.
Excused, we have Inglewood School Liaison Dwayne Tucker. Staff, we have Director Christina Underhill. Library and Cultural Arts Manager Bethany Lafferty and Patron Experience Librarian Carrie Watson.
To approve. Is that good? Also second. You're good. All right, then, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thanks, are good. So for public comment, he got in his email, do we need to read that or?
It is in the packet and it is public or
So
has been made public.
did everyone have a chance to read his email? That was. I would say that this is going to be addressed in this meeting, so I don't think we need to discuss it at this time. But I think that we should take note that people outside of this board are noticing that the library perhaps is underserved. And then after that, we can move on to the statistical report.
Real quick, Dina's saying that Teams won't let her into the.
Oh. All right, let me send her the link again. Let's see if. Go ahead, and I will send this to her.
Okay.
So days of service are of note. We already closed 3 days for holidays in November. That's why 2021 was 27 days out of 30 with Veterans Day and 2 days off for Thanksgiving. And then there was a couple additional days closed because we closed on Sunday, so that's why it's only 25. Just another item of note, study room sessions are going really strong. And I wanted to note that we only count the first time that they book. So like, if you get your 2-hour session and you stay in for 3 or 4 hours because nobody else has booked, we don't count that as a double or like an extra booking. So the study rooms really are constantly used. So that's a really big draw for people. Let's see, circulation is pretty steady. I did recently learn about Hoopla. We set a maximum dollar amount per year and then kind of like divvies up across the month. And when you hit your cap, your users will get a notice that says, sorry, there's been a problem or something like that. And recently learned how to examine that on the back end, and we are hitting our cap almost every single month. So people are really using Hoopla. And so, yeah, so it's interesting. Yeah, and like it also even shows you when people are getting the notice. So it usually comes like right at the end of the month too. But the other nice thing is that if you're under, so it's $3,000 a month is our cap. If you're under 3,000 spending, it will roll it to the next month, so then you can go a little bit over. But Celine Gardner, the technical services librarian, she and I were talking about looking at comparing some usage numbers and considering whether or not we may want to bump that in the future, because that service is getting used quite a bit.
I've gotten that notification before.
It's interesting, you can see their library card number too, so you can see the same card number trying a couple times. But now that I understand what that message means, we can respond to people's inquiries better when they're saying, hey, I got this weird message, I can't download a book on Hoopla. And we can say, oh, you know what, it's the end of the month, we've probably met our cap. Hang on, keep that title in mind. And actually, no, you said it does reset daily. So it's like, it even breaks it down daily.
Oh, wow.
So like, if you're trying, just try the next day in the morning and it should probably go through. So that was an interesting thing I learned about Hoopla last week. Let's see, the other thing I wanted to just highlight was the questions answered. These are all predominantly questions by adults of the way we've categorized it. So I'm trying to figure out, like, are we just not marking questions on behalf of children and we're still just marking in adults? We got to work that out, because I have only 62 questions for youth, and I'm thinking there's got to be way more than that. So further refinement, I think, in our data collection for questions. And then pretty good programming for children and teens. There was some good outreach for children. I'm going to talk about it in the action plan a little bit about what those were. But Kimberly's been able to do a bit more with the schools, which is great. And then we had a few programs canceled in November. So that's why our adult programs only had 16. So we had to cancel a couple. I think computer classes, maybe one writers group. And then I don't know, did that one genealogy, was that in November that got canceled? We had a plumbing issue.
It was.
That got, was uncertain what was gonna happen, so we had to cancel, one of the genealogy programs, so that was kind of unfortunate. And then our incidents for, November, we had 20 total incidents. And there were several exclusions. We're really just trying to utilize the tools to cut down on the problems that we're having, really. So,
is this since we didn't track it year over year, is this a little up from previous months? Does it come up as weather gets colder?
you know what, I don't know. That's a good question. I have recently figured out how to set parameters in the tracking system, and I could do some just like raw numbers of what was reported.
Actually, this is the kind of thing where Anna's report was probably more accurate. I mean, what are you seeing?
I mean, I don't know, because this is my first winter here.
Oh, no, but
I mean,
what were you seeing in terms of?
oh, yeah, that's what I was actually just going to try to find that, but I think there was some things were just not complying. I mean, it was just straight not complying with staff requests to follow the rules. And then we were like, okay, well then you have to leave.
Yeah.
So it really was that simple. There was one, I think that was in October though.
What I think will be interesting is over the months and years, this tool is in place to exclude people. But what we're gonna be proposing tonight for potentially more staff and then some changes to the facility, that we need to look back and be like, okay, did they decrease? And that's the hope, is with more eyes on the floor, we're checking people as they come in. There's some changes that I think will help us overall with the numbers and decrease some of the problems we're having. So I have high hopes for 2023 to head in the right direction.
So just a quick overview, the exclusions we had was one patron physically attacking another patron, destruction of property, cursing and yelling at another patron, fighting, cursing at staff, non-compliance with staff. 2 individuals fighting with each other, cursing, non-compliance with staff. Violation of a previous exclusion, so additional time added to the exclusion. And non-compliance with staff request and drug use in the North Lobby.
Which way?
North Lobby's the
Oh,
circle,
thanks.
yeah, the one with the mayor. So those were the exclusions. We had ejections for, just fighting and, we had a couple EMS calls. Yeah, so other is something that's not an ejection or exclusion or verbal warning, so like calling paramedics. We did have one individual who was following a staff member around, requesting only to speak to that staff member. And so kind of being fixated on a single person. We dealt with that over the summer as well. So this situation, I think we were able to kind of nip it in the bud much more quickly after the summer experience, just because we kind of knew how to just say, hey, that this is not allowed, you can't do these things. And then I don't know that we've seen that guy back, so. So I think, yeah, when we're just enforcing the rules and setting the expectations, people respond, so.
You feel like the rules that came down, I mean, the tools you were given,
Yeah, yeah, I think so. And I think, you know, we just have to do our part to make sure we're following the procedures properly. There still is a little bit of confusion sometimes with the forms that need to be completed with the police, but as long as we complete them and send them on to the police department, then there's not really a problem, so. But yeah, it helps. I mean, we still have some people who get excluded. When they come back, they might get excluded again after a couple months, but just have to keep at it, so. And I think we're getting more effective at explaining and just enforcing and then saying you crossed the line, so.
It's perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, so and then, just on that security note, we did hire a part-time security person for the weekend.
Good.
Who will start on January 3rd. Great. Any other questions about the statistical report? Anything that sticks out that you'd like further information about?
Yeah.
And honestly, the action plan doesn't really have any updates, save for one regarding children's services right at the very last page of it. So, that was, that they began doing, some outreach to Englewood Middle School and Leadership Academy. So it's actually gonna be like a weekly visit where they're visiting, a club, like a school sponsored club, and just being present at that club. So a different club every week. So the middle school was really great response, good attendance, and it was a little bit hit or miss for leadership. So they just started it in November. Hope to keep going with that. Yeah, the new team services associate Melissa, yeah, she is doing that and heading that up. So that was like the only kind of new addition. We kind of met the plan for initiating outreach to schools, but I just thought that was a neat thing that they were able to back on. And add. But nothing else really that stands out.
Is this something, this is my first year on the library for, I think, you read it annually, or you just kind of determine at the end of the year?
This
is how we
same
did?
action plan had kind of been in play for like 3 years now, I think. So I think that moving forward, it's probably a good idea to.
The library will close
What's the
in 15
development of the
minutes.
new one?
Please bring your items to circulation for checkout at this time. The public restrooms are now closed for the evening. Public computers will shut down in 5 minutes. Please please save or print your work now.
It's a new series. We just updated the announcements.
Okay. Yeah, as like that, then for Scott sees it, I think that it's probably due for a refresh. That said, there's probably not time at this present moment to develop that well.
I think we were
so-
kind of talking about bringing
Yeah.
that to the table next month. for
Yes.
sure.
Yeah,
Great.
kind of a
To get
high
it
level,
started.
like, here's
Yeah.
what we're thinking, what ideas do you have?
Yes.
And then we'll take it back and develop more detail with each of those, because I know Andy's been like, we need more data and all this, and I'm like, yeah, we do. But what does that look like? So we'll do a high level for January and then start fine tuning it as the months come on, so.
You remember when this one was approved?
Well, it's kind of gone by the whoever was in charge.
Yeah, I feel like this like actual one was approved on May. Or was it March?
It was March.
Okay, so,
That's when it got really long.
yeah, okay.
Like, Before,
That's right, that's right.
it was like 4 or 5 things, and it was like just an app thing.
Yes. That's correct.
I think it'd be interesting to know too, did we meet our goals? If not, why? Is the resource issue, some reflection on this could be useful as well as a tool.
And we have items in our strategic plan as a city that reflect the library and some of the things that we're doing down here. And so I would like to bring those into the plan a little bit more, so they're not doing double work when they're reporting.
I think that would be beneficial for all of us to see
Yes.
also.
Yeah, definitely.
Have this group and this plan informs that conversation on the
Yeah.
14th.
21st.
Of January?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like the third Saturday or whatever
Yeah.
before the holiday, but yeah. Yeah, that'd be great. So we'll have this meeting prior to that. We'll give you a good update on the council meeting, which we'll be talking about shortly, and we'll be presenting to you tonight, giving you recommendations.
The info from the street.
Yeah,
plan.
for sure.
Okay, so that-
We can show you what it is currently. I don't see it changing much, but it could change a little bit as council discusses what they want to see, and then the board can add to it too.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Anything else before we move on? All right. Budget is gone for the year. That'll reset here. All right. Back to our old business.
So yeah, as we are working towards, one path or another going forward, we do want to request a continuation of Sunday closure through the end of March. Mostly because almost either way, we need to remain closed on Sundays kind of indefinitely, or we need at least 3 months to put one of the plans in place. So that's kind of like, we need it regardless, and those are the two different reasons.
And it's the same staffing issues that you're going to.
Right, like because our staffing, even if we are able to move forward with one of these proposed plans and put in place, hiring for new staff, there's a process we have to go through that's going to take us at least through the end of March to complete. So we wouldn't really realize the benefit of increased staffing until that time.
Do you have the PowerPoint? You want to share it?
Not for.
Not for this part.
No?
Not for the Sunday.
Oh, no. I meant for the next.
Yeah, for the.
Did you say the PowerPoint?
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm gonna do that for the next part.
okay.
So this is just the.
This is just to say, request for that kind of emergency
Right.
that we discussed last month, to remain closed on Sundays. Yes, until, a new phase is
My,
decided upon.
just to do due diligence hasn't helped.
Oh, immensely.
Okay, great.
Saturdays especially, like for this past Saturday, for example, I didn't feel so like hectic and crazy, and everybody could comfortably take their lunch breaks without feeling they have to hurry back or, only take 20 minutes. And, our patron to staff ratio felt a lot smaller too, which is more comfortable and easy to manage. So it definitely makes a huge difference.
I mean, you really were convincing last time about the staffing issue. Like, I felt that was really pretty definitive. I do, and I'm glad we're talking about more staff, because, I mean, I hope, I hope staffing goes through.
Let's pause on this and
Yeah.
get there because
Yeah,
we
but
have a lot to cover.
no, I
tonight.
just wanted,
So-
I just wanted to say, I mean, I really hope that the goal, no matter what happens, is Sundays.
All right. Well, I move to, continue the closure on Sundays at the request of the library staff through March 31st, 2023. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. All right, presentation. And, so I think that's going to give like a full presentation. I think it would be helpful if everyone just took notes on any questions. And let's hold them for the end and then we'll have a discussion after inset, unless it's something like very unclear. I think that would just be beneficial to the group.
And if you could too, so this presentation is what we're planning on giving to council on January 3rd.
Okay.
So any feedback on the presentation, so you're right,
Yeah.
if it's not clear at the end, just say, hey, that didn't make a lot of sense. That way we can tweak it so it's understandable by everybody.
Perfect. Okay, so, Harry and I have put together all of this information, and hopefully it does kind of go along with part of the handout that outlines the plans. So you'll have that kind of to look at as well. But for current staffing, situation is that, as we get into January 2023, we will have 11 library associates, scheduled 20 hours of a week, providing 220 staff hours of library floor coverage. As you can see from the little graph, 220 hours is not enough to cover a full week of needed staff of 380 hours. Carrie and I did do a further analysis of what we would ideally need for a 7-day work week and having a truly full staffing scenario. So that's how we got up to 380. The way we allocate our workload currently is that supervisors spend a little over 50% of their time on the library floor, 35% of their time doing administrative tasks, and 15% of their time planning or trying to present programs. Library associates do 90% of their time on the floor and 5% each for planning and program presentation if they present programs at all. The current outcomes of this scenario is that we don't have quality time for programming and planning. The 7-day operations requires 380 hours a week. Full-time supervisors are spending more than 50% of their time on the floor. We've had to cancel computer classes, writing groups, book clubs, and just because we just don't have the staff to be at those programs. And then we've also had to suspend the growth of the local history nook and the archives. We haven't been able to accomplish any senior center outreach, and our social media promotions have really fallen off. So the first plan is proposes to have staffing increases of 5 FTEs, which would consist of 4 full-time librarians, 2 part-time 20-hour-a-week library associates, and also funds for program and service expansion of $30,000. This would allow us enough staffing to cover the floor time and of 380 hours. We have an additional 40 because we would have somebody dedicated. One of those 4 librarians would be dedicated to archives and technical services. The allocation of the workload under this plan would allow supervisors 50% of their time for planning and presenting programming, 35% for administrative tasks, and 15% of their time on the library floor. The new librarian positions would serve 50% of their time on the library floor, 30% of their time planning, and 20% of their time presenting programming. Library associates would have 75% of their time on the floor, 15%.
The library is closed in 5 minutes. Please finish your work and head towards the exit. Thank you for visiting.
And 10% for programming. And the outcomes we would expect from this plan is that we could grow the archives and local history collections. We could develop the non-traditional lending collection, increase both youth and adult programs and services, and then develop outreach activities more frequently and have dedicated funding for it. And we would be able to maintain that 7-day service operation. The second plan would be a moderate increase to staff
where we would still be able to satisfy 380 hours of floor coverage per week. There'd be 2 full-time librarians, 4 part-time 20-hour associates, and $20,000 allocated for program and service expansion. The workload shifts just a little bit, with supervisors having 40% of their time for planning, 35% for administration, and 25% of their time on the floor. The librarians would do 75% on the floor, 15% for planning, and 10% of their time programming. And that's presenting the programs. And then the associates would be about the same as they were before, 75% on the floor, 15% for planning, and 10% for program. And still really strong outcomes in this plan, where we would be able to develop the non-traditional lending collection, a minimal increase to youth programs and services, growth of adult programs and services, and moderate development of outreach activities. And we'd be able to maintain a 7-day service operation. And I didn't mention it, but the estimated overall costs are at the top there. So this one is just a little bit less than the first one. The third plan is just a mild increase to staff. So this just includes only 2 full-time librarians added, and a minimal increase to program and services of $10,000. This does not add quite enough to cover a 300, and in this plan, this is 348 hours we need for library floor coverage, because this is reverting back to a 6-day service operation. So that's why it's a little bit less, but we wouldn't have the full amount of staff coverage that we would like with this staffing model. The allocation of workload would still have supervisors at 40% planning, 35% administration, 25% for library floor. Librarians would be 75% on the floor, 15% for planning, and 10% for programming. And then the associates would go back to 90% of their time on the floor and 5% of their time for planning and program presentation if they do any program presenting. The outcomes here would be the initial development of the non-traditional lending collection, minimal growth to adult programs and services, and minimal development of the outreach activities. And it would be a 6-day service operation. The final plan is the zero budget impact plan. So this changes no costs, and it makes do with the staffing that we currently have. So we would add no positions, we would add no additional funding for programs or services. Supervisors would remain 50% on the library floor, 35% administrative tasks, 15% of their time for planning and programming. And library associates would be 90% on the floor, 5% for planning, and 5% for programs. This would only provide 63% of coverage of library floor operations. We would have to reduce some programs, projects, and services, and this would also have a 6-day service operation. So the shortfall in this plan is a little bit bigger than Plan 3.
Is this where we are now, the zero budget?
That's the zero budget impact is basically where we are now. So that would be going forward with a 6-day work week or 6-day operations week and the staff that we currently have. This is just a comparison of similar libraries that are municipal libraries with single locations. The populations vary a little bit, and the service hours per week, Littleton is only 4 hours more than ours. And
The library and civic center are now closed. Please exit the building. We will reopen tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. Thank you.
So the Bemis Library in Littleton opens at 9 a.m. and closes at 8 p.m. And so they have a half hour on either side on their Monday through Thursdays. They do open at 9 a.m. Fridays and Saturdays, but on Sunday, they're only open 1 to 5. So they get their extra 4 hours over our work week with those kind of 30 minutes earlier, 30 minutes later. But you can see that Bemis has almost twice as many total FTEs, twice as many librarians, and twice as many other staff, and twice as much budget. So, we're operating a library at only 4 hours less per week with half the resources. Broomfield has a slightly, obviously a bigger estimated population, and their hours are a bit longer. They go 9 AM to 9 PM each day, 4 days a week. So they do have longer work days, but they have significantly more staff across the board as well. So that's just a comparison of Englewood to similar libraries. And then this is just a side-by-side comparison of the library plans, just to kind of recap. You can see the first column is the varying costs, and these are annual costs that would be ongoing. The staffing additions, 4 full-time librarians in Plan 1 with 2 part-time. Plan 2 has 2 full-time and 4 part-time, and Plan 3 has 2 full-time librarians, and Zero Impact has no new staff. The first 2 plans both would maintain 7-day operation weeks with Monday through Thursday, 9:30 to 7:30, Fridays, 9:30 to 5, and Sunday, 12 to 5. The third plan and the Zero Impact plan are both 6-day operating weeks, Monday through Thursday, 10 to 7, Friday, Saturday, 10 to 5, and closed on Sundays. Plan 1 clearly provides the largest increase in additional librarian in charge coverage, provides 100% floor coverage, and additional funds for program expansion. Plan 2 has a 40% increase in librarian in charge coverage and 100% floor coverage and additional funding for program expansion. And then just 40% coverage for librarian in charge in Plan 3, but our floor coverage now drops to 86% and just a minimal amount of program expansion. And then what the program expansion could look like for these different plans, again, are the growth in the archives and local history collection in Plan 1, development of non-traditional lending items, collection items, increase in youth and adult programs and services, and the development of outreach services. Plan 2, we would only be able to do the non-traditional lending collection, minimal youth program increase, and growth of adult programs and services, and moderate development of outreach. And then in Plan 3, just initial development of the non-traditional lending collection, minimal growth to adult programs and services, and minimal development for outreach. And then the last plan is just a reduction in programs and just over 50% library coverage. So now it's time for your questions and discussion.
I'm sorry, I thought we were done earlier. Any more slides? You have a preference?
I would prefer to have Plan 1.
Yeah.
If I'm gonna be honest, because I feel like that is the plan that will give us the most, the strongest position to really grow things and provide some really fantastic programs and services for the community of Englewood. The other reason I really do prefer 1 over 2, because Plan 2 is still really strong and we can do a lot with it. So the thing I really like about Plan 1 is that of the 4 librarians that we would hire, 1 each would go to a department. So 1 to children's, 1 to patron experience, 1 to adult services, and 1 to technical services and archives. And we've had one of our part-time staff working in the archive. She did her graduate program about archive, work. And she tells us what a treasure trove of stuff is in there. If only it could really be well organized and marketed and accessible to the community. Because we do get a fair number of questions, predominantly via email, asking, for kind of local history research, a lot of obituaries, a lot of my family bought this house, what did it look like then versus now? And if we could really have someone to dedicate time to organizing and bringing that archive up to speed, that would be a really great resource. Because historical research and like genealogy stuff is really big for a lot of people, and having you know, a nice, strong archive to offer people to go back to their family's history on, I think could be a real gem.
I think that the presentation was incredibly well organized. I think that you were not descriptive enough of it. I think you need to define what planning is, define what that will bring, like. Say what you just said about the four, where those four people would fit, because I think that will make for a much more compelling argument. And then I also think that the safety issues should be directly addressed in this presentation and why floor coverage is important.
That's the part that people see, that
Yeah.
hear about.
And what, I'll look here, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, what you described last time is just really.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the balance I'm trying to strike is not leading with too many details.
Okay.
So, finding the point to put those out there. We have some good kind of data about floor coverage, because as we were kind of analyzing the in-house numbers, that's where Carrie and I were kind of figuring the ratio of patrons to staff. And there was a day a few weeks ago on a Saturday, and I was doing the hourly count, and there was like 42 people in the library, and we had 4 staff. And I was like, that's 10 patrons for every staff person in here. That makes me really uneasy. Like, I feel like a good ratio would be like 3, maybe 5 patrons per staff member on the floor. So it was, I feel like that's a good way to kind of explain why having that floor coverage is really important. And we redesigned the requirement from saying 4 staff members during a 9 to 5 to 5, so that we have an extra person in the circulation area. And the same thing for the night, instead of 3, having 4 plus a supervisor. And so that's the thing, these numbers always are kind of standalone, and the supervisors are in addition to that. The other thing that will happen, and maybe we can explain a little bit more what the librarian in charge coverage means, because what that is, you know, having a designated person kind of in charge at any given time on the floor, while there's still other supervisors possibly on hand. But what ends up happening, especially on the weekends and at night, is if I'm the only person in charge on a Thursday night and I have to call out sick, how do I get the others to scramble to provide that coverage? And this, having 4 additional librarians, that's 4 more people that can help cover across the board. So we can always have at least 2 people in, you know, eligible people in charge scheduled. So that helps, so that if somebody's off or they're sick or there's, you know, some other type of emergency, you have 2 people working together.
I would suggest coming on board to articulate why that ratio you described of patrons to staff is desirable.
Okay.
Because I think it could sound like staff heavy, but I'm sure that, I mean, we're pretty good. I'm sure you have, you know, articulable reasons for like.
Yeah.
I really appreciated the breakdown of, like, you know, the full-time librarians, and, you know, the part-time librarians, but I would also appreciate having data on, like, what are our current levels? Because I know we have like 2 open positions, but like those same breakdowns, like how many supervisors are we currently employing? How many librarian 1s are we employing? So just to say what our status quo is, to show, like, you know, those numbers, those breakdowns of, like, we're missing, there's a huge gap that we're not filling, and what that current staffing looks like, I think would just be beneficial details for council.
Did you want me to explain what that is? Would that be helpful to right now anyway?
Yes, actually, yes.
Okay, because I felt like that was a suggestion, but also a question.
Both.
So right now, in terms of full-time staff. The supervisor team includes myself and then 4 librarians, one for children's, adult, Carrie doing patron experience / circulation, and technical services. There is a full-time collection development specialist in technical services who spends 20% of his work week already on the floor. It's not really a requirement of that position, but he does do that. And then our full-time lead securities specialist, is the only other full-time
Yeah,
person.
we have no librarian ones currently.
Okay.
And then the rest of the employees, there's 18 total or 16?
16 or will be.
Yeah, 16, including the
Children's.
the new hires that will start in January, 16 part-time people, so 8 FTEs.
Okay.
And that includes the children's team in that numbers and the part-time technical services associate. So that's all the full scope of library staff.
Thank you.
I just don't.
I have a couple things.
Yeah.
One, you put a tremendous amount of work into this, and I'm really impressed. So thank you for the amount of work and time that you put in. Sure, it was like emotionally charged at times and really complicated, and just a lot of extra stuff that you had to do. So I really, really appreciate it. I agree with like that development need of there needs to be something at the beginning where you give just a little bit more detail of why this is so important. And I think you do a really great job with that, with the pie charts, when you talk about the shortfalls. The red versus blue, even the coloring, I think is really impactful. I would love to see that on the last comparison slide. When you compare all 4 plans, I'd love to see those 4 pie charts next to each other. And even one of your current situation. So like, this is where we are now, this is what we want. I think you could put the similar library stats where you talk about Broomfield and that other one, Littleton, towards the beginning, kind of draw us toward, like, we like understand why this is so important, because we talked about it for the last couple of months. I think if you give a little bit more context, my brain always works with context, and I know a lot of people's do. If you can give some context of like, hey, this is where we are compared to the people around us, that could be really helpful for when you go into your plans. Okay. Saying like, this is how we want to build it. Vividly. And then I think it might be a little bit interesting to see on that last plan, on plan 4, if we change no budget, what 100% floor coverage would look like to our hours. So if we wanted to have 100% coverage, this is what our hours would look like. And I think that would be really profound. The reduction of hours, especially if you make that need at the beginning of like, this is why coverage is important. It's important for safety, it's important for productivity. But I think if you bring that back to like hours and associates and library ones, like to give the full picture of like, if we want 100% coverage, we are open for 2 hours a day. Yeah. You know, I think that would be like really, really meaningful and impactful to drive your point home of, listen, we want to do our jobs. We want to do our jobs really well. We want to treat our employees really well. If we want to do that at 100% capacity, this is what it looks like. So those are just a couple of suggestions.
That's a really good. Yeah. I don't think, yeah, because I don't think, like leaving it red isn't really an option, right?
I mean, it shouldn't be an option. And I think that could be part of our recommendation.
Yeah.
From the board.
I think, at the beginning, if you move that slide with the Littleton and Broomfield toward the front, it would be interesting to see maybe at the end, like we're proposing it looks roughly 20% increase, which puts us closer in line with the number of people that live in Littleton versus the people that live in Inglewood, like it makes it a little bit more fair. It's like half, 15% of their budget. Like maybe a number that would be interesting.
Okay, so like showing,
What the FTE would be.
Yeah.
compared to-
Yeah. And
right, so like showing this as it is, but then doing another one where we change Englewoods based on one of the plans.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, yeah, that, I think that's a good idea.
I did consider changing it to hours. I think FTE is helpful, maybe also calling for hours. 'Cause everything else in the presentation is based on hours, but hours isn't in this table.
The thing that would be I can't, it's not, it would be apples to oranges in
Okay.
this table because I don't know how
Okay,
many
yeah.
hours some of the employees at the other libraries work. So, because I mean, I do know that at Bemis Library in Littleton, some of their full-time staff work 40 hours, but some of them work 30. So I wouldn't really know what their hours breakdown would be. So that's why we kind of had to stick with the FTEs and for how this data was shared in a state database.
I also like Amy's suggestion about putting this slide further towards the beginning because I'm not sure exactly like how much money council has. Like Chelsea, maybe you can inform us in terms of like this discretionary fund, but you know, yes, we're asking for some big numbers, but like, again, you look at Littleton's numbers compared to ours, like it's not so big, like when you kind of look at it that way. So it may make some of those numbers seem a little less scary in the ask if this is further towards the beginning.
Just to respond to your question, there is this amount of money in this discretionary fund or the reserve that we have. I think the question, and I have notes that I was thinking after the board has weighed in, but one of the questions I think for the council will be about this is not a one-time allocation, like this is clearly to a year-over-year allocation. And so that's just part of that conversation. We can pay for it this year out of our surplus, but what if we don't always have surplus, then it's just part of the budget we pay for.
Oh, hi. Well,
You're good, you're good.
I'm trying not to run over. It seems like prior to the pandemic and then coming out of the pandemic to the extent we've come out, it seems like churn has been a real issue. Is there and my guess would be that part-timers without benefits probably change. Is there a demonstrable way to show that like hiring full-timers has led to less churn, has a pattern of less churn?
I mean, I'm not sure, because I think historically, the Inglewood Public Library has not had full-time positions besides the library manager and the supervisors. So,
We used to back
Yeah.
then.
I mean, and I don't know how far back that would go and how accessible that type of data would be to us. I was trying to establish sort of a turnover rate of the part-time staff. But even some of that data was hard to come by based on systems they use in HR, and I don't know. So-
Do you think you're well, just
I mean, in the 8 months that I've been here, we've had, we've turned over half the staff. I mean, in almost all of the library associates, there's only 3 or 4.
Who've been here longer than a year.
Yeah, I mean, including the one in tech services, there's 5 that have been here for more than a year and a half. So that's, I mean, half of them have been here for 8 months or less.
I think it's fair to say that a lot of the part-timers do leave for full-time positions.
Yeah.
So I think that could be noted.
Yeah, and we have a couple part-timers right now who, one completed their master's in library science last year, one will be completing in 2023. And if we can't create and provide an opportunity for them to advance their career with Englewood Library, they're gonna advance their career somewhere else. And that has been said in the past that, you know, one more positive way to kind of look at the staffing structure of this library is that it's a stepping stone for people on their career ladder. But I think it would be more beneficial to have people progress their career here and have opportunities here. But really, we don't have that many. I think it was sort of a fluke that we created the collection development librarian. We had 2 supervisors resign, all in the span of a few months. And we were able to promote 2 or 3 people from within to full-time positions. I don't think that that's gonna come along again anytime real soon. So the possibility of creating career advancement for some of our existing employees, I think would create longevity in those folks. And then, having those positions will create more stability in the staffing, because the turnover would be a lot less, I think. I mean, we'll probably still see turnover of part-timers, but we're not so part-time heavy. We're not, basically 50% of our staff is not part-timers. We would kind of tip the scales a little bit more to having, if not evenly distributed, a little bit more full-time staff. And I think that creates a lot more stability.
From people to me.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that I would lean into in this presentation, based on like some work that I've done with schools, is that Inglewood prides itself on tradition and community. And when you can pour into that tradition and community, and that, like, what's at the heart of Inglewood, and also like with these goals and establishing that, I think it would be helpful.
Yeah, do you think if we included in Plan 1 that it would provide opportunities for career advancement for current staff, that would help kind of cast the vision?
I don't, but I think it's worth saying. Yeah, I agree.
I was curious about in Plan 2, is there's 2 full-time, I remember it is 4 part-time. I mean, Scott's point, is it a math time piece? Is it worth saying 3 full-time and 2 part-time? What is the?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it was more, I think we were kind of thinking about FTE and how we would divvy it up, and, I mean, I don't, there's not anything that says that one couldn't change to 3 full-time, even 3 part-time or 2 part-time, and keeping it at 2 part-time, because there is a logistical concern about adding any more part-timers to this roster.
Yeah.
Because we don't have physical space for many more. In terms of like, if they are gonna be off desk, where do they keep their things, and where do they have space to work? I mean, we do have 2 staff offices people can work from, but adding 4 more part-timers would definitely max out that space. So we couldn't, if we were gonna look at a part-time configuration, it wouldn't be worthwhile to add anything more than 4.
So
For
on
sure.
that though, would it be more beneficial to add 4 full-times and no part-time to this plan, or would that? Oh, sorry. I know you've done a lot of work with the numbers and hours and all that, but.
You mean like in Plan 1, how that one's,
Well, for Plan 2, like you're just saying that adding part-time could be.
and I guess also the numbers issue is with relation to the overall cost. Because
Yeah.
4 part-timers cost a lot less than,
But 4 full-timers would not meet the need
Okay,
of our coverage.
okay,
Because it would only add 160 hours of labor, and the gap is still more than that. And that's if all of those 4-time librarians spent 100% of their time on the floor,
Okay.
and it still wouldn't.
okay,
So while it would, of course, help.
Yeah.
And be really good and not create an additional burden of
It would.
managing more part-time staff, it still wouldn't meet the gap.
Got it.
I think this is one question, some of what I've heard this year is, we're full staff and then we lost someone, and then we're full staff, and we lost someone, and I think, obviously we can provide more resources, but what are the other things we can do to try to get to a more sustainable pace with the staffing piece? And so if there's an argument to be made here, of if we had more full-time versus part-time, we would have less turnover. That I think is quite compelling, and just to reduce the volatility that the staff experiences. And so if that's true, I think that makes sense of looking at those numbers. I have a couple other minutes, but I want to make sure.
I want to make sure that, was anyone else who is here virtually, is there anything else, any of you would like to add?
I just have one more question. When is this presentation to council?
January 3rd.
And how much time do you have for it?
I don't know.
15 minutes,
15?
15,
And then discussion after
and
that.
discussion after
Okay.
that.
So you're good on,
And it's part of a study session, so.
okay,
Cool. It's like an hour or.
Okay. Andy, Edie, Dina, anything from any of you? I just want to make sure we hear if you're trying to butt in.
I have a,
No,
I have a question. Is this just for, when you do the comparisons for Littleton, is it one library? Or more than one library?
One library.
Okay, all right. So I thought they had more than one library in Littleton.
No.
The ones that she brought last week, I believe, or last month, some of them had more than one library, but all of these just have one. Is that correct?
Yeah, in the comparison, the library comparison is just libraries that have one location. Because there are some municipal libraries that have more than one.
Yes, yes, yeah. I thought Littleton had more than one library location.
So,
Okay. All right. I thought it was very good. So, very well done.
yeah, I don't think I have any other suggestions to add outside of what other people have already said. I think it looks great. You can tell you put, a lot of effort into it. It's really well done. Maybe just to echo, somebody already said earlier, but just, adding the like colorful commentary that, you've had when answering the questions, just making sure that you explain some of that when you're on the various slides, but otherwise, well done.
Yeah, I'm coming in a couple minutes late. I apologize. I think it looks very well done. I guess my question is what support you need from us to council going forward in between now and the 3rd, if it's meeting with our members or speaking with folks or sort of laying it out or sort of showing up at study session or just attending, sort of what support you need from the board, and then how we can support you in this process, being that you've put all this work into it.
well, we would really like to have a recommendation from the board this evening so that when presenting to council, having a couple of board members or as many are available to attend, supporting that recommendation in person to council. So that would be certainly the feedback that you guys have given us tonight is really helpful, and we can do some tweaking and that would be great, but.
Did you have something else?
Oh, someone mentioned big numbers and it's definitely more money than I have. But really in the context of the city budget, these aren't, in my mind, terribly big, this is super rough top of my head math, but the general fund expenditures are like 64 million roughly, which would mean this would be under 0.5%.
Yeah.
Of the general fund, the total fund is like 182 million, which would be like 0.16%. It does not strike me as a huge amount of money in the context of the city budget.
Did you want to speak before we formalize any recommendation things?
Sure, yeah, I'll offer a couple thoughts. Can you give us the first slide?
Yeah.
I have a question of
This one?
how much discretionary funds are available? Do you know?
9 million?
Not really.
Yeah.
Fi-
To be
5
fair, though,
million?
there are a lot of choices that money needs to go.
Yeah.
That's not because, and just to be clear, it's not necessarily because we have this giant surplus, it's because we budgeted very conservatively.
Yeah.
And so we do have more revenues than we anticipated this year, which is something we don't anticipate to happen next year. But a lot of that will also need to go towards. Yeah. Much less, sorry.
a quick note on this is just this group has such the benefit of being here every month and having all of this context. The council has not heard directly from the library all year. And so I would just even start with some more legal setting, like before we get here, of just like, you've only been here for 8 months, like, I don't think we've ever even had a time with you in a council meeting. And maybe some background about like, just how our library is changing in America. They're changing a lot, right? And, you know, there's this, what librarians do for our communities and the services they provide. And also are now really at the front lines of how we respond for our in-house community, how we provide services for in a really equitable manner for our community. And so I just think, you know, one of the most compelling things for me is that the funding mechanism for the library has to keep pace with the way libraries are changing and the challenges that you're experiencing. And so making that part of the conversation feels really important to me. Obviously, everyone's mentioning safety, but I think it's also helpful in this to know who on staff of the library is a librarian and who is a security personnel, like making sure that we have clarity on like how many security staff do you have and do you need? Is there addition there? Breaking that up maybe a little bit. And then also acknowledging what have we done so far on a policy perspective to the tools that you've been using and what else might you need, right? So that is probably when the council thinks about our interaction with the library this last year, it's been passing those policies. And so just acknowledging like, this is what we have, this is how it's helped. Also, it's not solving all our issues because we have this giant staffing issue and just kind of putting it in context of the council, I think will be really effective. I had on my note that I definitely think it should include a recommendation from the library board and would welcome any of you to email the council, you know, your experience or your thoughts. I think those are things that are always really compelling. And then just finally, 2 questions that I just think you should be prepared for that I think that the council and my colleagues will ask. Is one just more clear to how did we get here? Like this graph is pretty striking because the pie chart and just clarity on you know, oftentimes council responding to requests. And we haven't had, I think, a request at this level to apply. And then also the elephant in the room is just it's outside of our budget process, right? It's outside of our normal budget cycle. Or just kind of explaining why we're outside the process. So those are some things that we just prepare for, but I think it's really well reasoned and important conversation.
That's helpful, thank you.
I mean, and I think that's super helpful, and I like the idea of you being prepared to answer those questions. I will need to figure out how to answer how or why we're outside the budget process, because that one I feel like has to be addressed properly, and I don't really know that I have the right answer.
I'll help you with that one. We did put a request for 2 additional staff this last year, but really nobody got staff at all, just due to budget. So we can we'll talk offline on what we've requested and then where we came from to get to this point, why it's looking like that and not all blue currently.
And I think also the clarity of, I mean, this was a tough budget cycle. We did not balance budget. We forced a balance budget through paying out of our reserves. Like those are realities that the council is very aware of. But acknowledging that like we're at a critical moment, in a safety moment, these are no longer nice to have. These are really like, not like we would love to have more programs. It was like if we want to be safe in the library, this is actually what we need, and that's the kind of conversations that we typically have when we talk about, you know, using our reserves. And so, or this unassigned fund balance, what it's called in the budget. So I think that can help kind of explain why we're here off cycle as well. Mm-hmm. It's the same reason why the only staff that we did approve in this year's budget cycle was for police, because we're experiencing this intense safety crime right now in the community. Obviously, we also had balance, so like there are things there, and I think this is you are experiencing many of the same challenges in a different context of city service, and I think that tying it together is helpful.
So can anyone advise us how we as a board should go about recommending?
Informally, we printed off each plan and we thought maybe I would want to sign one plan. I mean, that's one idea we had, just as a way of giving an official recommendation. I don't know if that would be something that the council would appreciate.
Also, could make a motion to support one, and if there is support for one of this or multiple, I'll just put it on the slide. So this is the plan, or the plans have been by the board.
The city's would be nice if don't have remote tonight.
Right.
I could drive around with that.
Well, the second would be Marie signing as the chair.
I also think that it's notable that we did receive that public comment, which is directly applicable to this. I'm unsure whether she actually listened to the board meeting because she reached out to you directly. Is it appropriate to reach out to her also for a recommendation, or is that not the right content? Or like, can we submit that letter somehow to the board? Council?
Was that sent to all of city council or just you? Okay.
But since you couldn't figure out how to give public comment, which is maybe another conversation about how we figure out. So you could share these with the public comment in the presentation, or you can say, like, what's received public comment concerned about staffing in the library.
That goes back to a couple things.
All three of the ones that we've had.
Yeah.
We could probably quote a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like the first one was predominantly about the safety.
Mhm.
The second one, while it was a little bit more critical, it was still addressing the point that some of the staffing or like the programming stuff kind of lapsed because of the staff in the attention. And then the third one is about the same thing, about the staffing, being able to give attention time to planning and programming.
I think not having received any public comment until like the last several months. During my tenure on the board is like, it's notable.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, whether you reach out to council directly or that becomes part of the
Yeah.
conversation, but notifying, noting that like, we have not had a lot of
Okay.
concerns.
Like, I'm happy to write a letter and I might also be able to attend the meeting, but
I've been on the board for 6.5 years and I remember one
Yeah.
other public comment and all of it.
okay.
That's so brilliant. Well, that goes back to that felt need again, like, and how much libraries are changing and that the services are changing. If you want a good example, let's talk about how many people are commenting on the things that are changing and on the detriment it's having to the library. So I think that's definitely worth noting, especially at the beginning when you're trying to like give some context to council about what's going on. And I don't know how often members of city council visit the library or how often they use the services. But any stories you can tie in are gonna like blow the statistics out of the water. People connect so much more to stories.
Yeah.
than numbers necessarily, and you have the numbers and the data to back it up, but I think if you can tie those things to experience, that the council can kind of like grab onto, the easier it'll be to get them to understand what's really going on.
I think especially with the 60s, like you were very, very, very compelling last month. And I know, and it was meaningful. So. Yes. Okay. Does anyone want to?
I move that we, what's the word, endorse or request plan one, yeah, I move that we recommend plan one as a body.
All in favor of recommending plan one as a body to city council?
Hi.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'm opposed to plan one.
Great, awesome. Is there anything else you want to add, Andy?
Yeah, I think my concern is sort of the longevity piece of that being, really a almost 25% increase to the budget, and not, I'm just more concerned about, I support it if we knew that this funding stream was going to be here every year, but being this is sort of coming out of one-time funds, I'm just concerned about building this and then having to scale it back a little bit with the significance of the number. I'm fully supportive in the plan. I'm more concerned about just what do we do if this chunk of money isn't here in the next budget.
I also think that concern can motivate us to work within what Chelsea was saying, like the budget process and going back to council when that is, whatever time frame that is, but to really discuss this concern and how do we get the longevity piece to funding.
Yeah, no, I agree. Just being in sort of the city budget process in another municipality, which I was working on this evening. So I apologize. I think it's just, we just don't know what the budget's going to look like in 2023 time. And we thought we were going to get some stuff this time and we didn't. And so I just don't want us to have to potentially cut budget because this was a one-time piece and potentially lay off staff potentially. That being said, if we feel as a board that is not a concern, I'd rather go more conservative, prove it and show that it can be and build upon it in the next budget cycle. But that's just sort of my life putting on another municipality's hat. So forgive me if I'm just in budget mode, but you know, plan 2 to me seems more realistic to get past and to prove that that level of investment is worth it. But if the group's on board, I am 100% supportive and we'll go sing the praises, but I just am concerned that that is a significant increase in our budget year over year, every year.
Should the board be recommending 2? Or should we?
I mean, I think it would also be fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
No matter what, they're going.
I think it would be fine to put in.
Okay.
I think what would be, we could put in 1 and have sort of 2 as like a, if not this, you know, this is sort of the bare minimum that we need piece as number 2, but that's just, and I look more to the councilwoman of sort of, I'm sure every other organization right now or program in the city is going to be coming to you for that, you know, chunk of money. And I just want to make sure that we have the best and most sort of realistic plan going into it. So they don't look at it and say $300,000+, you're out.
I also think it's appropriate for us to say that we would like to see the library at 100% staff or like, I don't know. I think that we can make one of those measurable things a priority as well.
So I'll just add in, so I've gone through a budget process where I had to eliminate a lot of staff. You know, because during the recession in 2008, I didn't cut the library staff. I didn't touch the library because when you go into a recession, people look for free services. It's the time that people need to look for jobs that need those services, and the library was the place people were going. They weren't participating in our recreation programs. They weren't coming to special events at cost. And so to me, I think if we go down that path of a true recession where we're starting to cut back, to me, the library is, I'm not going to say safe, but knowing just historically how libraries have been used and what they are for the public, it's something we look at in restoring. Maybe you cut back some service hours versus, and so it's still open and you still have the staff to provide the services, but it's maybe not as many to preserve the budget. And so that's my previous experience. Again, people, you know, the golf course is gonna not have as much revenue because people don't play twice a week anymore. They're playing once a month. And so, and we don't know the future. We may not hit the recession as hard as we think. We may not have the budget shortfalls. There's other things the city is doing to look at ways to increase fees, to recoup some of the revenues, to find new revenue sources. I mean, there might be a future where we're looking to do a library bond so we can build a new library somewhere else in the city. So there's a lot of moving parts to this. Part of me wants to put the Band-Aid on it and just say, yeah, get the best bang for your buck right now and make this the best place and safest place we can. And then we'll figure out the future. But the council will have say in whatever moves forward. And they'll probably have the same concerns as Andy of, you know, how do you fund this year after year?
Yeah. And I think between Ben and Christina, having some thought and be talking to Sean in advance of that meeting.
Yes.
How, because this will be an unassigned fund balance conversation, not a budget conversation. And what is the thought on a long term?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, and that's certainly like knowing that this is not a one-time ask, this is an ongoing ask. I do have a similar concern of, is this sustainable over time? That's initially why I was trying to be within the process. But then was, you know, provided another avenue, so.
You know, maybe I think plan 2 is like probably as low as I would hope it would go. And I don't know if this is accurate. I think asking for 1 with the notion that the council may compromise and go to 2. I wouldn't want to ask 2 and see them compromise.
Yeah. I think that
that is a really good point. And I think that, like, we see the background, we recommend, like, this is what the libraries need, and I think we need to do that. All right. Anyone else?
I mean, we could say we don't support a Plan 3 and 4. I mean, honestly.
I love that. Yeah.
Or don't support any plan that has less than.
Yeah, I think that one.
Because literally the last two aren't sustainable.
Still.
Motion, take a motion. I think,
Anything below 100% or is helpful.
yeah. But just say that the library not be set lower than.
Okay, I make a motion to. I don't know how to word that. Anyone?
I'll motion to support Plan 1 with a backup of Plan 2 as a recommendation of supporting Plan 1, but bare minimum of I think it's 200. Like I don't have it in front of me. $200,000+ is sort of the bare minimum that the library needs to maintain quality service.
There we go.
That was horrible. Sorry. That was horrible.
That's good. Way better. All right. Do we have a second?
I will second.
All in favor of that new recommendation?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? All
Aye.
right. Thank you. Thank you. All right.
So,
So-
if we could,
Yeah.
yeah, send letters,
Yes, can
is
you
that right? How does that work?
Yeah, if you'd like, if that's you all, you could send an email to, is it council@email.co? That's you.
So
Really, maybe we up to that, after Christmas and say, you know, we support a recommendation. Again, this is what we want. Of the library board and maybe share some of your experience, why you support it, you know, what have you heard, what is your experience in serving this board or being in the library? Boards and commissions are not just kind of like a nice fun thing for the council, like we really rely on citizen input to shape the decisions, which is why including recommendations from the board, having input from the board is really powerful because a lot of the council probably is not like super clued in on what's happening. Because you know, our job is to have a knowledge because it's a mile wide and an inch deep on a ocean, right? And so this, I think hearing from you all will be incredible.
And what are the details on that meeting as well, if anyone can?
So 6 p.m., January 3rd, it'll be in council chambers for the study session. As of right now, we're the first on the list, but that could change. But typically we'll be done by 7 o'clock and then it moves into the regular meeting. And what will happen after that, so if the council agrees to fund 1, 2, either one, Sean is already working on the budget supplemental that will be going forth in front of council later in January. And this is why March 31st is an important date. If council approves that budget supplemental, which would include whichever plan is picked, then that funding is approved, it moves into the library and then they can start hiring. That's probably a minimum 4-week process plus training another 2 weeks. So by April, we should be fully staffed and ready to go full force. So that's best case scenario.
The only thing I'll add is if you want to engage, obviously individual contact or emails is always really welcome and appreciated. If you would like to say something on record, and that's something that, you know, in 10 years, when we're talking about library staffing and we want to look and see what's on the record, you can always give public comment as well. Public comment starts just after we start our meeting at 7. If you would like to be in person, you can do that. You can do it virtually. You can also submit written comment in advance if you don't want to do that. You know, be aware that we will probably have already given direction to staff in that 6 to 7 range. So that will be afterwards, but you could still speak to say, thank you, or no, thank you, or I'm not happy, or I am happy, or this is what you missed, or this is what I can add to the conversation about these. Welcome.
The comment isn't during the the studies.
During. Okay.
And we just had our last council meeting of the year this last Monday, so written comments always nice, but yeah, I think the emails are gonna be important if you have time to put something together and send to council, just to share your thoughts and the direction you'd like to see the library go.
And just to clarify, I might have missed it, but during that study session, we will get like an affirmative, yes or no on our proposal, correct?
Correct. It'll give direction to the city manager then to make whatever change council is recommending.
Okay, thank you.
It's not an official vote. They can't officially vote during a study session, but they'll officially vote on the money that's going to be approved for this a couple weeks later. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So 4 council members will need to give direction and have consensus to move forward.
Yeah. And hopefully we have one.
All right, is there anything else on this right now? I would just like to say thank you to everyone on the board. Thank you to all of you. I think this is the most meaningful work that we have done as a board since I've been on it, and I appreciate that those of you who were not attending last time who went back and listened to that meeting. That was important. So thank you for taking the time. And yeah, all right. There's no new business, right? Okay. Is there anything else for staff's choice?
I just want to thank you all for your time and commitment to this board. It takes a lot of volunteering hours to be part of these boards and commissions. So just thank you for this last year, and definitely you've provided a lot of great advice and insight so we can get to where we are today. And I'm very excited about January 3rd. It's going to change everything about this library for the better. And we have some other things in motion related to the facility. We're meeting this week with facilities to see what it costs to do a single entry with potentially a security guard. So that may be a January presentation I'm excited to give, because it will change also when people walk in, they'll be known and seen the minute they walk through the doors, which could change their behavior while they're in the library as well. A lot of good things. So thank you all very, very much.
No, I just thank you for all your input, feedback, and suggestions. Everything's really helpful, and I really appreciate your patience with myself and my team as we try to work through this issue.
Board members' choice? Anyone?
Well, it's the holidays. I just want to say I'm really grateful for the board members, staff, liaisons. This is like coming and spending an hour or so a month around other people who care about libraries. It's like my version of going to the spa. I appreciate it.
We need to talk.
Needs a better.
Oh, I'm trying to be.
My shoulders are really tense right now.
I thought I was too, but I'm not.
Anyone else? Chelsea, you've given us a lot of insight, but is there anything else to it?
Now, as Christina said last night, we had our last council meeting of the year. I'm excited to start fresh next year and a whole host of new challenges and new good things. And yeah, for your time on this board, it's so meaningful. I know sometimes I started on a board commission where you're going for an hour a month, and I'm not sure if hours are making a difference. And it really does, because in moments like these where you put in the time, all of a sudden it's form a really helpful moment. And so.
Anyone else? Happy holiday.
Happy holiday.
And I will send an email with helpful email addresses, time, date, all that to the board as far as how we can support. Okay. And yeah, thank you. This meeting's adjourned at 8:25 p.m.
Thank you.
Bye, thanks.
No, I thought I was.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Solicitations to.
I recommended for you.
Well, thank you.